Hi, everyone. So, as promised, I wanted to put a video together to give you some ideas on how to improve your ankle mobility. So, you can probably see it most highlighted in the squat. But I know some of you have written me in regards to feeling some limitations, even through just some basic, mobility drills that I've incorporated where we were working the hip and that ankle was just not cooperating. So, the first thing that we want to do, or that I recommend, and you try to find like a daily regimen for this, because if you want to improve mobility, truly you have to practice just like anything else. So the first is working through just some simple soft tissue work, and I'll show you a variety of options for that. Really just working some ranges of motion and challenging that range of motion. And the biggest thing is when we're challenging a range of motion, mobility, with a joint, many times if there's restriction, it's like the body restricts, so it feels like it's putting you into a protection mode. And you have to learn how to breathe and how to relax into some of this work. Otherwise, I think there's just that natural, like, oh, I'm going to tighten up, I'm going to protect response. So that would be another, just some basic mobility drills. And then ultimately we want to apply it. And one of the simple, applications is your goblet squat. So I'll show you a couple of ways that you can do that, whether it is loaded. I like the assisted version because then you can really just settle and sit and move around in those ankles a little bit. So the first thing is working through some soft tissue. Highly recommend you get a lacrosse ball at home. They're highly inexpensive. And you should also invest in something like this. It's a really creative name. It's called the Stick. And they have different lengths that you can purchase. So there's like smaller, maybe half this size. I like the bigger one. I like both really, but the bigger one's great too, because you can maneuver some things a little bit more easily, if you want to get into the traps and that sort of thing. And then also a foam roller. So those are three things that I would recommend that you look into investing in to have sort of in your, home gym repertoire. So foam roller can be anywhere between like an 18-inch or a 3-foot. I like both, again, because there's a lot of movements that you can actually do on the 3-foot as well. So the first thing that we're going to do, because we're focusing on the ankle today, is you're going to utilize your lacrosse ball. I recommend that you sit in a chair to do this. You can do this seated, but you can get a little bit more leverage if you're upright. So if you're on the floor, you can't get as much leverage. But basically, all I'm going to do is put that lacrosse ball under my foot and just start to massage, front and back all the way through. So I'm working through the arch. I'm going to the heel of the foot. Obviously, you don't want to lose control of the ball anywhere. So you just take your time with it. And you can certainly, do this maybe while you're just watching television, you're sitting at your computer desk, and just start working through that tissue a little bit. And when you find any areas that might be a little tender, maybe you can just sort of pinpoint that. And I almost attribute it to, like, if you're kneading dough, you get to a spot, you got to work through maybe a little bit more than others. So you're going to find that. You're going to find that some areas are a little bit tighter than others. So obviously, anytime you're doing things like this, you want to work both sides. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time. I just want to give you the techniques and the guidance on what to do. And then I'm going to recommend that you do something like this for maybe a minute or two either side, okay? So just spend some time working through that tissue. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work through the lower leg. Now, I'm going to recommend that you work through, a lot of the soleus, because many times we're going to tight through the soleus, tight through the gastroc, that's limiting that. Sometimes it's down deeper in the joint, but in order to do that with something like this, it's myofascial work. So the fascia is what can create a lot of these problems, tightness in the fascia and the tissue. So I'm going to work through, that lower leg, just going back and forth and just really warming it up, because what you might find is right away you go, oh, it doesn't really feel so bad. And then as you get deeper and deeper into the tissue, you'll highlight some of those trigger points that you go, oh wow, that's a little bit tender, and that's the kind of stuff that you want to work through. Okay, so with something like this, like I said, you're going through the lower part of that calf, which is more the soleus, and then you can also get up high into that gastroc. And keep in mind, the gastroc is it's like two heads of the muscle, right? So we want to work both sides. and just nice and easy. And if you find a hot spot, maybe spend a little bit more time on that and try to work through it, okay? So that would be how to utilize your stick. You can also, if you want to just be well-rounded, work the front. It's called the tibialis. It's on the front side of the body. You have an anterior and posterior. So we're just going to work the anterior side and then do that nice and easy. You do not want to go on the bone. That will hurt you. Please don't do that. Now, if you've got a foam roll, okay, we can do very much the same thing. Little harder, requires a little more work on your part because what we're going to need to do is lift our body weight so that we can put more leverage on the leg. And what you're going to want to do is cross the other leg on top. Now that adds some load so that you can get down deep into that tissue. Many times what I find, I've worked with clients in the past where doing this, it was just too much on the shoulders. They just couldn't hold their body weight up. So this was their savior because they were able to work through quite a bit of that. Now what you can also do, so let's just go into this a little bit deeper. So let's just say I'm working through this. I can hang out in this position and I find a hot spot. What I can now do is go through flexion and extension of that foot and really kind of work through it. Find the highlight, the hot spot, really, woo, doggy, that is tight, you know, you can work through. You can also just very simply utilize your foam roll. Don't worry about putting the weight and the leverage down. Just hang out there and work flexion and extension. You might find some areas that feel tender on the foam roll. That's fine. You know, it's not going to do any damage. It's going to help you, in fact. And then you can go through nice, slow rotations. So you want to go both clockwise and counterclockwise. I find that when people rush, they rush through what I call like the sticking points. So as you start to go through rotations, let's say I'm starting counterclockwise, you might find it go, there's a sticking point. You're like, wow, that's funky. So just work slowly through that sticking point until it starts to feel a little bit smoother. And then you can switch and go the other way. So you've got rotations, clockwise, counterclockwise. You've also got flexion and extension, okay? And then, like I said, you can also add load to that flexion and that extension when you find a hot spot and you want to kind of dig into it a little bit more. So that, in a very quick nutshell, is some soft tissue recommendations daily, you guys. If you really feel like you were so limited by those ankles, those are great to start with, okay? Now, we have incorporated just some basic movement. So we've done the half kneeling position. Let me show you more this way. So we've done the half kneeling position, right? Just like this. Now, what I like to do is utilize, I took this right off my broom, you guys. So take a bar if you don't have a PVC pipe somewhere, and I'm gonna take that just inside the foot. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push to the left side of that bar and then just push straight ahead. Now, here's the tricky part. I don't want my heel to come off the ground. I also, because I did it on my first one, don't want to cheat. So here's what I mean by that. So if I'm facing you, I've got that bar on the inside of my toe. Hopefully you can see that. I'll back up a tiny bit more, right? Right on the inside of that toe is that if I come around to the side, what don't I want to do? Right? Kind of cheat it. So you're just going to keep that nice and straight. And ideally, I am working to go as far as I'm able to go this way without allowing any part of that foot to come off the floor. And then let's try the outside of the foot. So now on the outside of the foot, I can work coming out. How far can I go before that heel comes off the ground, okay? So we want to keep that nice and straight. And if you want to continue with that forward motion, you can, or you can just go one direction, go the other direction, okay? Call it a day. So little ankle mobility movement. Then here comes the fun one. Now we've done the hip flexor stretching. We've done all that kind of stuff, right? So what we're going to do is we line up into that half kneeling position, and then I'm going to back up a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push forward. I'm going to put my body weight on that leg as much as I'm able. The goal here, however, is that this heel, that is still on the ground. That heel is not off the floor. I'm going to find that position that I'm able to work, because everybody's range of motion is completely different, right? So let me just review that. So if I'm in this position and then I bring my body down, I'm going to push my hips down, but really my goal is what? Is this. It's trying to get my knee over that toe without allowing that heel to lift. So if you end up here, right, you went too far, you need to drop back a little bit and just start challenging that range of motion, and you can pulse it here. So when you're doing any kind of like pulse or ballistic, push, I usually recommend that you do a little higher repetition, maybe to 20 to 30. So if you're here, you can do it this way, 20 to 30 repetitions, keeping that heel on the floor, either side, okay? So either side on that. Now, another one that's a good test, and I'm trying to figure out how to best show this to you, but you're going to use your wall. Now, let me see if I can move this camera. So we're going to move the camera so that you, hopefully, can see what I'm doing here on that wall. Let's do it like that. There we go. All right, so I'm going to use the wall. Now, you can't see my head, but don't worry about that. You don't need to see that. All right, so I'm going to start maybe like half of my foot length. And my goal here is to simply push my knee forward towards the wall without allowing my heel to come off the floor. And I'm just going to move forward and back. If you can move through that pretty freely with 10 reps, back your foot up a little bit, heel stays down, and let's challenge that again. So I'm just literally going forward and back, keeping that heel on the ground for about 10 to 15 repetitions per side, okay? 10 to 15 repetitions per side, and you can just keep kind of inching back. And remember, the breath, relax, let your body know you're calm. It's not a stressful situation. You are just working mobility, okay? We're not under load. Now, since I have you here, I'm going to utilize my bench over there. Let me get you on this book. It might steady you, okay? So if you have a step in your home, you can actually utilize that for just some basic drop, so you can really drop the heels. I'm going to use my bench here. So what you'll do is, if this is your stairs at home, right, rest the ball of your foot on the edge and just go through some drop. You're going to get a nice stretch through the calf, and then you're going to come all the way up. I would work that calf raise and then relax, breathe into that stretch, and then come up. You can exhale it as you're up. So we're going to inhale down at the bottom. So I don't want you to necessarily look at this as a calf raise. If the calf starts to get too tight, just hang out here. That's it. Breathe into it. Just consider it a static stretch and hold. But if you want to make it active and move through both ranges of motion, then you would come all the way up into that calf raise. And as you notice, I'm not putting all my weight on this foot because my other one is here on the step. So I can give it a little bit of assistance on the way up. So I'm not working so much of the calf raise. I'm really working on the drop of that heel. Now, do that on both sides, you guys. All right, both sides. Now, in speaking about, a calf stretch, and I'll push this down again. So calf stretches are, perfectly fine. The ones that you guys are probably familiar with, which is, here, because the stretching that calf is going to be helpful. So I'm dropping that heel down towards the floor. You see that? Okay. So I'm going to drop that heel down towards the floor, which is going to hit more of that gas drop. Make sure that heel is on the ground. Now, if I come forward and I kind of take my knee, almost as if I'm bringing it towards that toe, now I'm going to hit more of the soleus down the base side of that leg. So I stay in this position, get the nice stretch through the calf, and then I can drop that knee down, still trying to keep that heel on the floor, and I'm going to hit the bottom of that leg. So you're going to get a little bit more into the soleus. Now, I've showed you in our open hip stretching how you can make that, some ankle mobility. But I'll tell you, if you can incorporate these movements, the myofascial soft tissue work, some basic, flexion and extension, rotation, clockwise, counterclockwise, and then some of these just kind of movements, the ankle mobility left and right, getting up against the wall, knee to wall, getting on something elevated, dropping the heel, raising the heel. Those are going to be great. And then we want to apply. So let's apply it to a movement that we do often, which is our squat. So the goblet squat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you guys back over here because I need you to be able to see me on the bands. All right. So, okay. So what I'm going to recommend is that you have something to assist you. Now, can be anything. So if you've got bands at home, great. If you've got a TRX at home, great. If you've got the back of the couch that you can hold on to, perfect. It's just enough to hold you, something to hold on to, so that you can really just focus on moving around down at the base end of that squat. Now, hopefully we freed up some mobility. Do not expect miracles, but little baby steps will continue to grow and get bigger. So what I'm going to show you is I'll utilize my band. So what I'll do is I'm going to pull down in my squat. Now I've got the band, it's holding me up, right? What this allows me to do is to keep my heels on the ground. I keep my spine long, and now I'm going to work, left and right. And if you notice, I'm pushing that knee forward over that toe, and then I'm going to come around. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You guys really want to watch that you don't get collapsed. Your knees don't collapse in. I'm just going to work, kind of sitting, settling my hips down, really pushing that knee so that heel stays on the ground. That heel does not come off the floor. Maybe you're up here and you're working it here. That's okay. If you have help, you should be able to drop. If you're holding on to the couch, if you're holding on to some kind of TRX or anything, it's going to help you to work through this ankle mobility. And then what I would recommend is using it less and less. So I've stayed down here for quite a while, so I'm going to come all the way up. You might want to shake those legs out. Then you can test things. So maybe you have your fingertips slightly on the couch, and you're going to test, okay, how far down into that squat can I go before I feel like I get pushed back, right? Or I need to go up onto my toes. So those are the two indicators where that ankle just says, nope, sorry, you don't have any extra range of motion here. Your hips are going to fly up, and or your heels are going to fly up. So one of two things is going to happen. So give this a try. Give me some feedback. Try it. I don't know. Take the next week. For those of you that really feel like you're struggling with ankle mobility, incorporate it, let's say 4 out of 7 days, for the next 7 days, and just let me know whether you're starting to see some improvements. And then start applying it to those exercises or to those mobility drills where you felt limited before to see whether you have increase, whether you have improvement. You need a baseline, right? So you need some form of a baseline. What I would do is test those things maybe before you go through the routine, and then test it again in another week, in another 2 weeks, or what have you. All right, so hopefully that is helpful for you. If you do have any questions, please just write it in the comments below. And again, I love giving you guys my knowledge. So if you have any other questions in relation to anything else, please let me know. And as always, be well, be safe, be strong, and I miss you guys.